Bum, 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 bum. Bum, 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 bum. Okay, so
This means that the god Talos is actually made
wait. La, 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 la. Yan, kita makan.
actually made up of
Hey,
3 people: Hjalti Earlybeard,
okay.
Zurin
What's
Arctus, and the
use
High
of
King Wolfhalf.
movies?
This is my understanding of this all,
When you
and to be
use
honest, it's
this
all needlessly
and that,
confusing.
assign
But
the
what we do
focus.
know is that
Oh,
Talos is
nice.
100% a
Oh,
god. He's basically like a god times 6. I mean, I don't think that's really how it works, but if we combine Wolfhalf, Zurin, and Hjalti together, Talos the god has gone through all 6 walking ways. So you know what? Suck on that, Thalmor. And I don't want any of you calling me a Thalmor sympathizer again. I got it in the neck in the last Talos video. Still, since we've confirmed that Talos is a god and the many ways he did it, we also have to talk about his association with Shaw. You might be a little surprised to hear he has one, considering his main association is with Akatosh, being a Dragonborn and all. Now, I've been calling him Shaw this entire time, but you may know the god as Lorcan or Shazar. Either way, it's all basically the same guy. The thing is, it's believed by some that when Talos took his place as the 9th Divine, with many saying it was at Akatosh's side, he used Kim to mantle Shaw. Essentially, he took Shaw's identity, or at least his place, as the missing god, now found. This feels a little bit strange to me, considering that Shaw was never a member of the Divines to begin with, but he is an Aedra. Since Talos isn't, mantling Shaw's place
let's
might be
go.
how he got into the 9 Divines, since other Dragonborn Emperors who achieved apotheosis, namely Alessia and Remen were never a part of the Divines. But all of this information largely stems from comments made by Michael Kirkbride long after he left Bethesda. Still, with Talos the god having a bit of Zurin in him, there is a Shrezarine in there, so this technically could be possible. Now, that largely explains Talos' godhood and his backstory, which are both a bit of a doozy. But there are still 3 odd bits I want to discuss. Just because he's a god doesn't mean you have to worship him. You might hear that and think you're starting to sound like one of those pointy-eared Mer, which is a valid complaint. But remember, Tiber Septim did commit a war crime at the end of the Tiber Wars. The Tiber Wars were also so devastating that people started to call Tamriel the Arena, so he caused a lot of death. But he is a god of war, and you can also argue that he didn't commit a war crime in the context of Tamriel, so that's all valid. But here's my second counter. Tiber Septim is potentially a diddler, a kiddie fiddler, Diddy Septim even. Well, according to the real Baronzia book series, you see, when partially through his rule, Tiber Septim sent for one of his generals, Symmachus, who brought with him Baronzia, who was, at the time, the princess of Mornholm, and she was 17. Tiber was 82 when they met, but the age gap didn't stop the pair from having an affair, and Baronzia grew pregnant. But to stop a potential issue around succession, Tiber had the baby aborted and then sent young Baronzia away. I mean, this is a pretty heavy accusation. It's adultery and
Whoa,
an Epstein impression
wala
all
yung
at once. But don't you
Shit.
worry, Talos fans, there is a chance that this could not be true at all, since the real Baronzia book series is known to be pretty sensationalist, and it is also known for some weird dates. This same source states that King Lysandus of Daggerfall was born before his own father, so if the affair even
And their
happened,
shield.
it might have been between two consenting adults. So, pinch of salt? Yeah, pinch of salt. Then there's the matter of Tiber Septim's race. Sure, Heimdall is pretty confident he's a Nord, and the Orthodox story claims that he's an Nord with extra steps. With a name like Hjalti Hurley did, he's definitely got some Nord in there, but there's also some claims that he is a Breton. Hjalti was born in High Rock after all, and the book, The Wild Elves, states that Tiber was a Breton. In Coda, the super weird unofficial graphic novel by Kirkwood, Kyle refers to Talos as a man-mer, and because Bretons are partially elven, this could point to a Breton Talos. Then again, remember that Talos, the god, is actually three dudes. Wolfhalf is an Atmoran, covering that base, Zurin Arctus is a Breton, which covers that, and Hjalti is a Nord, which would then make the god Talos all three races. Talos' aspect, Wolf, was an Imperial, so he could have been an Imperial too, but I'm pretty sure a god's aspect doesn't always have to represent the god's original race, since Zurin Arctus is a Shezareen, and yet he's a Breton with some elven blood. The final thing we have to talk about is Tiber Septim's family. Turns out he had a brother, Agnorith Septim, who I haven't mentioned at all thus far because he basically stood there like a traffic cone the entire time in the background, apparently. Still, I assume that Agnorith wasn't a Dragonborn, purely on the basis that he didn't bloody do anything, and didn't turn up to the Greybeards. Then again, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure there's nothing saying that there can't be multiple Dragonborns at once. Still, a little fun fact is that most of the Septim dynasty doesn't actually come from Tiber Septim's line. Tiber's son didn't actually get to take over. Instead, his grandson, Pelagius I, did, but he had no children, so when he bit the bullet, his crown went to Agnorith's daughter, King Tyra. The entire Septim dynasty from then on went through Agnorith's line, and if he's not Dragonborn, why can they wear the Amulet of Kings? I guess Akatosh can just choose people to be Dragonborn instead, but if Agnorith was Dragonborn, why didn't he do anything? I know damn near nothing about this man other than that he had a daughter and he existed. I'm sure if he was Dragonborn, they would have written about the
What the
great feats he did during the Tiber Wars. Then again, it has been suggested that Kintyra is actually the illegitimate daughter of Tiber Septim, and that the character of Agnorith was made up to make her claim to the throne stronger, which puts Tiber Septim at possibly two adultery charges. I mean, there's so many potential things with this guy. Hardly anything is concrete fact with him. You know what? I'm just gonna stop talking about the Septims now.
No, this whole thing, all of this, it's all about me.
Ooh, that was a long one, but thank you all for watching if you've made it this far. This is a complicated topic that was probably the heaviest to research out of any one video I have done thus far. Achieving
Yung
godhood is weird in Elder Scrolls, and I
ata?
sometimes feel that Bethesda can't get its story straight with Talos. It's like the
Ay.
vision behind Talos changes with every game, and it has led to a mess, quite frankly. Still, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I promise I'm not a Thalmor spy, even though that's exactly what a Falmore spy would say. Look, I'm just an old school Catmoran shore lover, and in the name of shore, I ask you to like, comment and subscribe so you can go to Sovngarde. Again, thanks a ton for watching, and hopefully I'll see you in another video.
Drink the blood and become my sons, or by dawn you'll never survive. And so the path was born again as
Ano
the
ma?
wolves of Yorbaska,
Yung alin?
to rule in life and serve in death
Ah.
as the moonlight's bound under. And so the path
Oh.
was born again as the wolves of Yorbaska, to rule in life and serve in death as the moonlight's dark hunter.
Potato cool. Tough. Potato cool. Raw beef. Potato cool. Tough
By the end of their journey,
beef.
the Dragonborn is ridiculously powerful. According to Versus Battle, a truly reliable source, he's stronger than Perfect Cell, which, I mean, surely not. That guy can blow up solar systems. Either way, John Skyrim is really strong, something that I covered in this video, so that must mean we clashed with some extremely powerful enemies.
Uy.
Sure, we curb stomped dozens of bandits, wolves and nameless dragons, but there are a few heavy hitters in the game that are way stronger in the lore than you probably realise, mainly because of Skyrim's presentation. And yes, we're looking mainly at the lore,
Okay.
because the question of who is the most powerful in-game is obvious.
Crazy.
It's that bloody frost troll on the way to High Hrothgar, camping there like the boogeyman under my bed. The furry bastard. Look at him, look at his stupid face. Go fussrow yourself. In all seriousness, let's quickly go over who the most powerful enemy in the game is from a mechanical standpoint,
Pwede ba
because
pala
it's pretty
binawasan ko
easy
yung
to
ano,
answer.
jump?
It's Karstag, the ghost of the frost giant from
The
Morrowind.
fuck?
He's level 90, hits like a truck and amphetamine, and cannot instantly be killed by the Wabberjack or Mehrunes Dagon, and cannot be paralysed. You may be thinking, what about the Ebony Warrior? But he only gets up to level 80. Sure, he can't be ragdolled, but he can get one-shot by Mehrunes Razor, and that 10 level gap makes a big difference. Now, you could argue Alduin or Merak, since both can get up to level 100 and level 150 respectively, but Alduin can
Give
be
me
as
the
low as
books.
level 10. And Merak
Give
starts
me
at
the
level 35,
books.
so you don't need to be that strong to beat either of them. You can't physically fight the Ebony Warrior until you hit level 90, and if you fight Karstag super early, it is going to be a rough time, whereas you're actually expected to eventually fight Alduin and Merak, even though most of us don't actually do the main quest. Although their in-game power does not represent the firepower they're packing in the lore. So let's have a look at some candidates for Skyrim's most powerful enemy in the lore. Of course, there are a bunch of powerful entities that we have to fight within Skyrim.
Parang
Vampires,
mahirap
dragons,
makahanap
dragon
ng
priests,
vendors
possible
dito.
gods and so on. As a result, I've prepared a short list of mighty foes that I think are worth talking about, and we'll get to the most powerful at the end of the video, with the added context from this shortlist, which includes Durnavir, Archcurate Verther, and Camel, under very specific circumstances, Karstag, the Ebony Warrior, Valok the Jailer, Merak, and Alduin. I'm not looking at NPCs you can antagonise because they aren't really enemies. I would have to add the Sijic monks and the Greybeards to the list otherwise. I also chose these specific enemies as they loosely represent different categories of NPCs we meet, which
Balik
will
ako
make
din ah.
sense soon hopefully. But enough messing about. Let's get started with Durnavir.
There was a time when I called
Now, I have Dunavir as the most powerful dragon there is in Alduin. This might be a little bit of a controversial opinion, because I feel like most people would instead say that Parthenax is the second most powerful dragon. And yes, Parthenax can potentially be an enemy, so he could theoretically be on this list. But there are quite a few reasons why I put Dunavir here instead. One is because of some danger of cheating. Now, we've been kicking around since the Merethic era and haven't spent millennia being buried, so theoretically, Parthenax and Dunavir are similar in age. And according to Curse of the Dragon over here, he was a big deal in Tamriel. According to him, he lived in a period when
naman ng
Nova roamed the skies, vying for their small slices of territory that resulted in immense and ultimately fatal battles.
he said he was a part of it, and the fact that he isn't dead and buried, slain by another Dover, means that he was probably an above average dragon at the time, maybe comparable to some
Yan,
Dover.
dalawang
He then
rat.
gets a buff from the ideal
Malas
masters, allowing
malas
him
ko
to
naman.
use necromancy, and then gets stuck in the soul cairn guarding Valerica. Valerica actually gives us some context for how powerful Dunavir is meant to be. Now, she is meant to be an incredibly knowledgeable necromancer, probably at the master level of conjurer, who managed to find her way into the soul cairn without giving her soul, and is a daughter of Coldharbour, making her one of the most powerful vampires by default. Yet Valerica cannot comprehend the idea of defeating Dunavir. This is the same woman that has effectively been in a stalemate against the ideal masters, yet she is stunned that the old dragon goes down, and while she put two and two together, realising that he was going to come back, it puts into perspective how powerful Dunavir must be to keep someone as cunning as Valerica from doing basically whatever she wants. With the dragon bones in her lap, it can be implied that she slew a dragon, which would then implicitly tell us how much stronger Dunavir is compared to the average dragon. Now, this is all theoretical, and I'm not sure Valerica fought Dunavir before she met us, so she might not have a strong first-hand account of his power. She probably saw a big undead dragon summoning a bunch of skeletons, and thought to herself, I'm not going to deal with that, I'm going to go hide in this castle before he tears me apart,
Gravel,
which would be
carrot,
the logical thing to do.
mutton,
But here's
kappa.
the thing,
Kappa.
Dunavir's raw power doesn't matter that much, he just respawns almost instantly. He's practically a Dark Souls protagonist, except he's the size of a bus, breathes fire, and summons a literal skeleton crew. The only reason he lets us get away is that we're
Huh?
one of
Anong
2
lechon?
people in the entire world who can summon him in Tamriel.
Carrot,
If
saka
Dunavir
gravel.
ever wanted to fight someone in the Soul Cairn, he could just keep going until he wins. And even then, I think it's debatable whether he can beat Parthenax without respawning because he has so many different powers at his disposal. With a respawn? I mean, lore-wise, I personally think that he's the strongest enemy we fight in Dawnguard, because you can't put him down, and in sheer raw power, he's magnitudes above Valerica. I mean, we're the Dragonborn. We are literally engineered to turn dragons into natural history museum displays, but we can't absorb his soul and put him down for good. The only other dragon's soul we couldn't absorb was Alduin's, and am I the only one who thinks Dunavir is stupidly overpowered in the lore? Let me know. But while we're on a Dawnguard tangent, let's talk about Harkon and Verthir together.
My domain is vast,
Ganda
my
sana
riches
ng-
endless, and my power infinite.
I was the arch-curate of Ariel, girl. I had the ears of a god.
Now you might be asking why we're slapping these two leeches together.
Champion
Well,
sa
if you were
board.
to ask me to make a short list of the most powerful vampires in Skyrim, I would put Morvarth, or one of the Volkihar vamps at 5, Serana at 4,
Third
Valerica
vault,
at
let's
3,
go.
and then I'd have trouble deciding between 1 and 2,
In
which
the
would
past
be
30 minutes,
Harkon
like
or Verthir.
more
You see,
apologies.
Harkon is the final boss of Dawnguard, Verthir is the big
Oh
bad,
right, may
pulling the
nakalimutan ako.
strings behind
Whoa.
the scene. Harkon
What
only
the
being beaten
hell?
by Auriel's bow is 100%
Cheesy,
because
that's
of
cheesy.
being in the game. I don't think there's any reason we couldn't curb stomp him into ash without it in the war. Now, Veltha isn't a pure-blooded vampire like Harkon, so if we're only looking at their vampiric powers, Harkon is
Buti
stronger.
meron akong
Yet
fear
this
gas.
ice pop little Moor has done some pretty crazy things. He somehow managed to manipulate a prophecy in the Elder Scrolls, and I'm not sure how that's possible.
Kaya
The Elder Scrolls are indestructible
like,
fragments of
sa
creation,
akin pa lang,
outside
itong
of
unang ano ko pa lang na to,
that tell events
dalawang
of the
champion
future
na
and the past.
Like,
So,
ha?
how did he do that? He also
Okay.
survived the Snow Elf Purge by Ysgramor and his
Yung
boys,
lakas
which
ng mega
has to
jump.
count for something, considering that
What
these
the
are the same guys who purged frost giants from Skyrim, and whose lineage has somehow won a war against the Dwemer. He also has the title of Archcurate, so I think it's fair to say that he would have been one of the most powerful Snow Elves even before he became a vampire. Then again, Harkon somehow managed to sacrifice 1,000 people to Merlag Bol before becoming a vampire. Which, I mean, how did he do that? It isn't written in any book, so I'm assuming Dracula's less cool cousin managed to do that without anybody knowing. Huh. Now, to Verthir's credit, he did nearly manage to get revenge on a god. But even though these two are the top two vamps in Skyrim, they're both kinda chumps. Well, they wouldn't be in any other context, because both are genuine threats to the world. They both nearly blotted out the sun. Harkon is the top dog vampire in Skyrim, and Verther created a plan and prophecy capable of fighting Oriel, who is also Akatosh, the same god who was summoned to go deal with Mehrunes Dagon in Oblivion, and that was seen as the last-ditch effort needed to deal with Dagon. But fighting a god is not the same as actually being on their level of power, and that kind of makes Harkon and Verther lacking compared to some of the heavy hitters in this list. So let's move on to the black sheep of the group, Ancano.
I had hoped your scholars would be on a level comparable with my own colleagues. They aren't.
You might be wondering, why in Oblivion is this Thalmor scrub here? Well, as much as nobody likes him, he's not a scrub, at least in the context of all of Tamriel. He's a decently powerful wizard, considering that he stands out among the Altmer people, known for their great magic. Sure, he'd get folded like origami by Harkon, turned into a chew toy by Durnevere, and dropped from the top rope by Verther. But I feel like Ancano slips in a tier below just the very best mages we meet in Skyrim, such as Neloth, Savos Aren, the dudes in the Sijic Order, and Giselle. Yes, I slipped him in here. What are you going to do about it? So, you might be thinking that I've rattled off a bunch of mages better than Ancano,
Uy,
so
grabe, lakas
again,
ng ulan.
why is he here? Well, he got control of the Eye of Magnus, and for that short stint, he was on par with a god. Maybe. We don't know what exactly the Eye of
Uy,
Magnus
gago,
is,
champion.
although I've seen some compare it to when Dagoth used the heart of Lorcan. This kind of makes sense if you believe the Khajiit, and think that the Eye of Magnus is actually the eye of a god named Margus, a deity of sun and sorcery. We don't know enough about the thing, but I personally believe that it's somehow connected to a god, perhaps even an Aedra, in some capacity, meaning that Ancano had near godlike powers before we rock up with the Staff of Magnus to show that Thalmor agent that magic is in fact for nerds. I'm unsure if Ancano achieved apotheosis, at least
24.
for a short period of time, which would have temporarily made him an actual god. Because if the Eye of Magnus can do some of what the Heart of Lorcan could, it's theoretically possible. Now if you want to know more about apotheosis, I have a video here on Talos to explain it some more. But, in
Damn,
summary,
like,
Ancano could have potentially been godlike in power at one point. One very specific point, putting him pretty near the top. Without it, he's probably just an expert level mage, so put an asterisk next to him and let's move on. Karstag's status as Casper's very powerful and very angry uncle in-game carries over in the lore somewhat. Frost giants in general are a pretty mean bunch, although they went to war with Ysgramor
Bawasan
with
ko pala
boys,
tong
which is a bad idea
Mega
if you've
Jump
got
ko.
something to do with frost or snow in your name, and were made nearly
Level
extinct.
2 lang.
I believe the average frost
Lipat
giant is
natin
more
siya sa
powerful
dash.
than the average giant, and if you've played Skyrim enough, you know that giants pack a punch. So I guess this puts into context how powerful Ysgramor is, which will come up later with a different entry. Still, Karstag appears far later in history as a king of some Reeklings, before getting captured by a group of Hircine's hounds, essentially some really powerful werewolves. He then got put in a maze and was made the prey of a great hunt. To his credit, Karstag had made it through most of the hunt, prepared to face Hircine's avatar. It isn't known if he would have won that fight because he ended up getting done in by the Nerevarine, who has an exceptional win rate against actual gods. So it's like fighting an uphill battle on ice. A win was never on the cards for Karstag. When he gets revived as a ghost to fight the Dragonborn, that doesn't really help us either, because the Dragonborn also ends up defeating a god, which we'll get into later, so Karstag is somewhere between stronger than most frost giants and weaker than god slayers. As I said, doesn't really help us. Granted, he was taken by Hircine's hounds, but he was also summoned by Hircine himself, so I'm not really sure we can use this to talk about Karstag's strength either. Karstag was considered worthy enough to be one of Solstheim's 3 champions, so that has to count for something, right? And perhaps he's stronger as a vengeful ghost, given that he's a super late game boss. Ultimately, it's
crafting
tricky
lang
to
talaga
fully
siya.
gauge Karstag's strength because of how much lore he lacks, and I'm not entirely comfortable with him being stronger than someone like Harkon or Verthir, but he's definitely not the strongest. So let's move on to the Ebony Warrior.
Except for you. You are my last challenge. Only you can send me to Sovngarde with honor.
We don't know a lot about the Ebony Warrior, but my headcanon is that he is one of 2 things. He is either the apex of what a relatively normal mortal can achieve naturally, or the avatar of a Redguard god of war, Raymond Ebonarm. Ebonarm is known to be clad in dark armour, and has an ebony sword fused with his right
Plus 4
arm.
armor na
He
kasi
also
to.
has reddish blonde hair and steel blue
Maganda
eyes
yung
apparently,
helmet.
which the Ebony Warrior doesn't have. Now this is why I say the Ebony Warrior is
Healing
potentially an avatar,
efficiency.
not Ebonarm in person.
Isa lang yung
If
plus
this
4
is
health.
the case, he's got the power of a divine and obviously packs a huge punch.
Malakas
If
din yan yung
not, he's just a monumental Chad
ay
with the powers of the voice, who can at least keep up with the Dragonborn. In many ways, I would perhaps compare an entirely mortal Ebony Warrior with Ysgramor, provided Skyrim's biggest elf killer isn't actually a dragon priest or dragon. Both have access to the Thu'um ebony armaments, since Walthrad is made from ebony, and are extremely competent warriors aiming for Sovngarde. So I think it's a fair comparison, and says a lot about the Ebony Warrior that I can even make the comparison to begin with. And I'm not the only one doing it. The official Prima Guide for Skyrim states that he's the mightiest warrior the country has seen since Ysgramor, which includes loads of warrior kings, with Olaf One-Eye being a major example, the one who defeated Numenex and put his skull in Dragon's Reach. He has access to 3-word shouts too, and can thus withstand them, making him extremely tough lore-wise.
eternal
He
blade.
could be the closest thing a regular mortal can get to challenging the
Prefix
gods,
yan.
and while I don't
Ice
think he would beat Alduin or Mirak, purely because he lacks the means to defeat
Focus.
Alduin and lacks Mirak's sheer variety, I believe he
Effect
would
avoidance.
comfortably beat
Wow,
everyone else
legendary
mentioned
effect.
in detail thus far, provided we snatch the Eye of
Effect
Madness away from
avoidance.
Ancano. With all that said, we're still guessing with power and
We
making
are
some
keeping you though.
abstract theories. So let's get to someone who has a feat of strength we can
Focus.
actually visualize, and
Of
no
course.
character has one better than Valok, the Jailer.
Hi.
Ginok, on that process.
In my opinion, Valok the Jailer is the most powerful dragon priest of his era, if we don't include Merak, and even then it's debatable, for one major reason. Valok beat Merak. You see, while Merak was busy with his rebellion against the dragons, after asking for the Apocrypha library pass from Japan's wet dream over here, Valok caught on. He got his lizard squad together and battled it out with Merak at his temple on Solstheim. While Valok probably had a numbers advantage, he got the better of Merak, and the battle was so fierce that the region of Solstheim got separated from the mainland of Tamriel and became an island. Yes, Solstheim is an island because the battle between Valok and Merak went so hard that it exploded off of Skyrim. You could animate something like that in Dragon Ball and people wouldn't bat an eye. This is particularly eye-opening because Dragon Priests don't seem all that remarkable when we fight them in game. But note that these guys were absolute units in the lore. Merak had 3 Dragon Priests as part of his posse, and all 3 were imprisoned in Solstheim. The Dragon Cult as a whole was credited with imprisoning these Dragon Priests, although I believe it makes sense that Valok probably had something to do with this too, meaning that he could have gone 4-0 against fellow Dragon Priests, which includes Arzadar, probably the greatest mage of his era. Even after getting done in by us when he's all wrinkly, Valok ends up with 1 win and 1 loss against Dragonborns, and you have to be really damn powerful to have a record like that. It took an Elder Scrolls protagonist to break his monumental winning streak, and if it wasn't for Hermaeus Mora coming in to save Merak at the last minute, we wouldn't even have the Dragonborn DLC. While all Dragon Priests pack some serious heat, Valok has the biggest gun of them all, and he's still not number 1. No, the number 1 spot belongs to one of 2 beings, and I think we all know who they are. Still, let's cover Merak first.
And so the first Dragonborn meets the last Dragonborn at the summit of Apocrypha.
Merak is the first Dragonborn, and it's the closest thing we have to a true equal and rival. Obviously, he helped create an island for an explosive battle, but there are also a lot of signs that he might be stronger than us. Well, he straight up is on our first interaction in Apocrypha, basically dismissing us. But even after we learn the Bend Will and Dragon aspect shouts, I don't think we match Merak's sheer power, at least with the Thum. He has a forward shout, which we are never able to learn, and that shout instantly turns dragons into a paleontologist's stream. That's right, he can one-shot dragons, has thousands of years of knowledge in Apocrypha, is an incredibly potent mage, and claims he could have beaten Alduin. Now, if you consider that he had us on our knees on our first meeting, and we could, and probably should, have beaten Alduin before this, he might not be bluffing, but we'll get into this later. I would even argue that no mortal has ever had Merak's sheer command over the Thum with his forward shout, and he is probably the strongest Dragonborn ever until we absorb his soul, and thus take his power. You have to bear in mind that Hermaeus Mora couldn't deal with Merak without us, and only manages to keep him trapped, with his escape inevitable, until we come along. Merak is an unstoppable force at this point, and we are the immovable object. But if he's so powerful, perhaps more powerful than we are at the time, why does he lose to us at the peak of Apocrypha? We're in his backyard, and he has 3 dragons to jump us. Well, my theory is basically ring rust. He hasn't really had a fight in over 4, maybe even 5,000 years. And we've spent almost every day since Helgen fighting up and down Skyrim. We're a honed axe, and he's a sword that needed some time on the whetstone. In terms of sheer power, I'm not prepared to say that we're Merak's equal during this fight because of that forward shout. That's how much heat he's packing. But because we've been using all of our tools in fights against mighty foes, we're better at putting everything together. Sure, once we absorb his soul, we've surpassed him, even without a full word shout. But before then, he's probably the single most destructive enemy we face outside of Alduin. We also don't land the final blow. Tentacles McGee does, and he only does that after Marak has been severely weakened during the fight. Now yes, he lost to Valok, but Valok's really strong as well, and he had the might of the Dragon Court at his back, most likely, meaning that things were scaled in his favour. I don't think he's actually stronger than Marak one-on-one, but we don't have enough details about their fight to disprove that. Still, with all this Marak glazing, there's a reason I'm talking about him now, because Alduin is the strongest enemy we face in Skyrim's lore.
Face me then, Zuul
Alduin is the World Eater. He, individually, is Elder Scrolls' Ragnarok. Now, his power level depends on whether you think he was gearing up to eat the world at Solstar, or whether he needed to be factory reset to become a World Eater, not a World Conqueror. In the former example, he's 100% stronger. But we don't know how exactly he would have eaten the world. I wouldn't be surprised if it becomes the size of a planet and starts munching away, although I have heard theories that he actually eats time. Either way, when Alduin is ready to eat the world, he's basically one of the most powerful beings in all of Elder Scrolls, gods and all. And since it has been implied that Alduin has ended the world before, no one can really stop him. Well, except us. Kind of. Again, it depends on the theory you believe in, but either way, Alduin is straight up a god. I know he's technically an offshoot of Akatosh, and his eldest child / shed skin, but he's a god. He's the dragon god in the old Nordic pantheon, and other cultures have names for him too, like Alkan in Khajiit lore. This makes the Dragonborn a god slayer, much like the Nerevarin before him. And as the only straight-up godly being in Skyrim, it's pretty easy to put him as the most powerful adversary we face. You might then be asking, wait, if Alduin is the most powerful, why do you think Marak could beat him? Well, for the same reason we could. Beating someone is not the same as being more powerful than them. For a sports analogy, think of Man City and Tottenham Hotspurs. Man City do everything better than Spurs. They have a better squad, more money, a better manager, more confidence, more winning pedigree in recent history, yet Spurs, no matter how bad they are, always cause City problems, routinely drawing or winning against them. We, and by extension Marak, are the Spurs to Alduin's Man City. We are practically built to be dragon slayers, and while Alduin is a god, he is also a dragon. Had Marak partnered up with the Sovngarde trio back in the day, and then learned Dragonrend, he probably could have beaten Alduin. In modern times, it would have been tougher, since I'm pretty sure he wouldn't be able to learn Dragonrend. But he's got so many ways to give Alduin problems. He could use Bend Will on Alduin's servants, and has an auto-delete dragon button with his forward shout. Yes, this probably wouldn't work on Alduin, but he's built to slay dragons like us, and is thus Alduin's kryptonite. Still, as a god and a world eater, Alduin is the most powerful enemy we face in game, especially because he has the potential to grow exponentially stronger. At the end of the Kalpa, the world cycle, nothing will stop Alduin from eating the world. We were just lucky it wasn't time yet.
He likes me, so he's trying to mimic.
Wait a
the way
minute,
I-
who likes you? Who likes you?
He likes me. He likes me.
You know, they have rumors that say that one of us is the imposter.
I don't know who's the imposter, but
Thank you all for watching. This will be coming out on the Chinese or Lunar New Year. I call it the Chinese New Year because as someone who is ethnically Chinese, that is what I will be celebrating. I guess it's appropriate that we ended up speaking about a dragon, although he's the year of the horse. I probably should have found a way to talk about Shadowmere. Nah, just look at this picture of China using Draco Malfoy to celebrate instead. I mean, it's brilliant. So, Have a good year of the horse, and enjoy entering a very Chinese part of your life if you want to get involved with the celebrations. I guess not a lot of changes for me, but maybe this will be the year Bethesda show us something to do with the Elder Scrolls 6. Who knows? I guess it depends on how much Todd loves horses. I mean, we all know that he loves making money off horse armor. Either way, I hope you enjoyed. Like, comment, sub, you know by now, and maybe I'll see you in another video.
Chicken.
The wolf bore its fangs and spread its claws and tore at its own hide. Drink the blood and become my sons, or by dawn you'll never survive. And so the pack was born again as the wolves of Yorbaska, to rule in life and serve in death as the moonlight's bound hunter. And so the pack was born again as the wolves of Yorbaska, to rule in life and serve in death as the moonlight's dark hunter.
Oh my God! He is absolute. What an absolute brat! Ah! You can't. Don't. If you're not watching the game, if you're not listening to the game, bloody hell! If you.
While Alduin threatening to turn Nirn into an all-you-can-eat buffet makes him the main villain of Skyrim, the enemy that everyone seems to still be talking about is the Thalmor. They are the outside threat that we
So,
don't take
since
down,
wala pa
and
tayo,
unlike Harkon, Merak, or Alduin, it's clear that we won't be seeing the last of them. Granted, we deal them a few blows here and there, but the Thalmor are a major enemy long before Skyrim and remain an enemy long after, likely getting a spotlight in the Elder Scrolls 6, coming to you sometime this decade, probably. Please? Still, the question of what the Thalmor actually want and how they go about doing this is far more complicated than it may seem. On the surface, they're an ultimate supremacist organisation that wants to take over Tamriel, subjugating everything that
glass
isn't
iron
alive. But
lift.
if you look into their lore, they're somehow worse than this. But before we look into what the Thalmor want, we're going to have to talk about the Aldmeri Dominion, which is going to take a while. So, pull up a chair in the library, get comfortable, and let's talk about the worst kind of myrrh in Tamriel.
Leaves.
The Empire, in its wisdom, has come to recognize Talos worship as a barbaric remnant of a bygone
Bakit?
age.
Oh,
Now, the
nakukuling ako ng
Thalmor and the
bakit.
Aldmeri Dominion are linked, but are separate entities. In short, think of the Thalmor like the ruling party of the Somerset Isles, while the Aldmeri Dominion is like another empire. The third Aldmeri Dominion, the one in Skyrim, is made up of the Somerset Isles and Valenwood, with Palatine and Anaquina, two provinces making up a split elsewhere, being two client states of the Dominion. While it is the third iteration of this Elven alliance, it is quite different to its previous versions. But the one thing that has remained the same is the people involved. You see, the Altmer of the Somerset Isles and the Bosmer of Valenwood have always been fast allies since the formation of the first Aldmeri Dominion in the Second Era during the Interregnum. This was the period after the fall of the Second Cyrodiilic Empire, founded by Remen Cyrodiil, and for whatever reason, they also sought to get the Khajiit involved, forming a mini-empire to protect each other. The Dominion was the brainchild of Aaron Arana, who, before ascending to the throne of Alinor in the Somerset Isles, did some travelling in the recently fractured Tamriel. After basically coming to the conclusion that it was a madhouse out there, and that the Altmer should huddle with their friends for safety, she formed the Aldmeri Dominion. Now at the time, elsewhere suffered from a terrible plague, and Valenwood was in the middle of a civil war, with both provinces asking the Somerset Isles for aid, so it wasn't as though this was a forceful occupation. You could even argue that the first Aldmeri Dominion was a relatively friendly affair. at least compared to the absolute cruelty of the Thalmor's third dominion. When the time came for the first dominion to go truly continental, they set their sights on the Ruby Throne, hoping to rule over all of Tamriel and bring elven rule back to the continent. I suppose like the times of the Morphic era, but this was never meant to be. The Dominion found itself against rival alliances, the Daggerfall Covenant and the Ebonheart Pack, and together these are the three factions in ESO. All three wanted to put their guy's butt on the Ruby Throne, but as we know from history, this was also
We are
not meant to
hunting
be.
for some
Before the
rabbits.
interregnum had ended, all
Because the
three
fault
would
has been
collapse,
hunting us,
and
hunting
Tiber
us.
Septim would come out of nowhere to eventually ascend the throne as the founder of the Third Cyrodiilic Empire, and
Rabbit,
then become a god.
rabbit,
Still,
give
we're
me
not
some
leaving the
rabbit.
interregnum quite yet. After the fall of the First Aldmeri Dominion, the Altmer saw a chance to run it back when Valenwood had yet another civil dispute. You see, there's quite a cultural divide between the more modern Bosmer and the more primitive tribes living in the wilderness of the Gratoaks, and this often leads to the country being quite divided. The heirs of the Camoran dynasty used this chaos to make a claim to the throne, and in response, some in Valenwood sought their enemies in the Colovian estates for aid, thus pledging a portion of Valenwood to them. In response, the Altmer conquered the country, using a stewardship clause in the 1,000-year-old treaty between their nations to justify the invasion, thus forming the Second Aldmeri Dominion in 2E 830. About 250 years after the first one. This is where our villainous protagonist enters the picture. The Thalmor, the new government in Valenwood, established on behalf of the Aldmeri-backed claimant, Camoran Aneximus, whose ancestors had made the treaty that caused the invasion in the first place. From here, the forces of the Colovian estates were forced out of Valenwood and back into what would later reform as Cyrodiil, and the Second Aldmeri Dominion consolidated its power from here on, making allies with the Reachmen, who would later become the Forsworn in Skyrim's time. Their ally shortlist also includes the Magi, Sea Elves of Pandonia, and apparently made a treaty with the Elsewhere Confederacy. This Aldmeri Dominion was a mighty one, and even when Tiber Septim came crashing into the picture, the Altmer's opposing empire proved to be a stalwart force against the Dragonborn Emperor. Still, it would not last forever, as we well know. Tiber Septim conquered all of Tamriel after all, and I want you to note a few things about the way he defeated this dominion. An important thing to remember is that the Thalmor are technically a ruling faction at the time, and while they aren't on top like they are in the Fourth Era, they are a powerful party in Valenwood. Elves also live for a very long time. They don't kick around for practically eternity like the Lord of the Rings elves, but it is possible, although rare, for them to live for over 1,000 years. For an extreme example, take Knight Paladin Gelabor. While he's a snow elf, he is still an elf, and would have been around in the Merithic era, making him not too much younger than some dragons under Alduin. The reason I bring this up is because while generations have passed between this time period and the time of Skyrim for humans, some elves might even remember what Tiber Septim did to conquer their nations. It's easier to consider the man a god when you weren't around when he was, whereas for the elves they remember him being that mortal man. An emperor, sure, but still a mortal man. And it's not like Tiber Septim used his own godly power to conquer these elven realms. He had got the Numidium from the Dharma of Morrowind, and had found a way to power it without using the Heart of Lorcan. I won't go over this in detail here because it's very, very complicated, but if you are interested, here is a video all about Talos. Either way, through this artificial god, which also doubled as a Dwemer Jaeger, the Second Aldmeri Dominion and the people in the Thalmor were forced to watch as their elven empire, likely harbouring ambitions to bring back elven rule to Tamriel like the good old days, was forced under the heel of a man. The painful irony of this was that this man used a giant mech built by underground elves, the Dwemer, which was then given to him in parts by Ashy Elves, the Dunmer. Then they had to watch this dude apparently become a god. Now, I say apparently because as far as these elves were concerned, he was a dude using hacks to cheat his way to a win, and then proceeded to wine and dine off this cheating. Now, we obviously know that Talos is a full-on god, which I explain in the aforementioned Talos video, but also you get his blessing, so what more proof do you really need? But you have to understand, it is a bitter pill to swallow, especially because Tyber had ascended straight to the status of divine, alongside the Eight, which isn't something any other mortal who ascended to godhood had actually managed to do. This is one of those cases where sweet denial is better than swallowing the bitter truth, and this entire situation was especially bitter for the Thalmor. They were now elves stuck being ruled by a human, and his dynasty, and unlike the people of Morrowind, didn't get to keep their autonomy. Still, there wasn't really a lot they could do about it for quite a long time. And the Thalmor were no longer the ruling party of Valenwood. They ended up being a minority voice in the Somerset Isles, and while they had plenty of power still left over from the Second Aldmeri Dominion days, they weren't really being taken all that seriously. For the time being, the Outlaws were forced to be a part of this new empire, although it's not like they didn't flourish like the rest of the continent, at least for the most part. Tiber Septon's rule in particular was known as the Golden Age, and because of this, the Thalmor were sort of on the fringes at this point, and I guess the only reason why they weren't completely disbanded was due to their rich history. But they didn't rule Valenwood anymore, and so they no longer had the purpose which had made them so powerful. While I mentioned their role in the Second Aldmeri Dominion, they had actually began as an obscure council group in the Altmeri government during the Aldmeri Dominion. That's Altmeri, as in High Elves, and Aldmeri, as in Elves in general. And the Thalmor were tasked with safeguarding Altmeri heritage, which is probably where their obsession with bringing back the good old days when elves ruled the continent came from. Their role got expanded when the first Aldmeri Dominion was founded as a sort of Dominion law enforcement. This included sub-factions like the Fists of the Thalmor, the Divine Prosecution, and the K-Thalmor. I bring this up because it's important to note how instrumental the Thalmor were in both Aldmeri Dominions. Their histories are very much intertwined, and the organisation always had a role in the Dominions, yet when the Empire came along, they had no real purpose anymore. They had been pushed to the periphery by a human who had become a divine. And if you pair this with their history of safeguarding Altmeri heritage, it follows that they started to become extreme in their beliefs and their hatred of men, stemming specifically from Talos.
Your life is nothing. You serve zero purpose. You should kill yourself now and give somebody else a piece of that oxygen and ozone layer that's covered up so that we can breathe inside this blue trap bubble. Because what are you here for? To worship Talos. I mean that with 100%, with 1,000%.
Now armed with this added hatred, the Thalmor re-emerged late in the Third Era as a radical xenophobic political movement, believing in elven supremacy. For the most part, they were largely ignored because elves were currently being ruled by men. So, you know, it's hard to believe that you're all supreme when a dude with a tenth of your lifespan is calling the shots. It's like believing humanity is the superior race when a sentient dog is in charge, and he still has the lifespan of a regular dog. Actually, didn't Dragon Ball do that? Is this how the Thalmor see Tiber Septim? I wonder. Still, the Thalmor would not be in the periphery forever, and this all changed when the Fire Nation, the Oblivion Crisis happened. Same thing really. The Oblivion Crisis hit everyone hard. Except for the Argonians, apparently. They were loving it, going full Doomslayer because the Hiss apparently gave them steroids that made them Argonian super soldiers. But this video isn't about those scaly chads. No, you see, being an island nation proved to be a monumental pain for the Outma of the Somerset Isles. Marin's Dagon was, in fact, the storm that was approaching, and these storms surrounded the Isles, preventing any way to sail to safety. Now remember that I mentioned that the Thalmor, while largely ignored, still had power, and this power actually came in useful. At least allegedly. They claimed to have shut at least a few Oblivion portals, although we don't know if this is true because the Thalmor are serial liars and professional pot stirrers. They didn't really help the Somerset Isles too much, since Dagon's Hell Squad had driven most of the Outma to the Crystal Tower, one of the ancient mystical towers that stabilised the Mundus, or the universe. It also doubled as a magic school, and was where the Outma made their last stand, apparently under the command of the Thalmor. Well, the Thalmor were credited, but again, they could have made the person who actually did this disappear, old secret police style, and then have taken the credit. But this was where their propaganda machine began to come into full effect. Still, whether the Thalmor defended the tower or not, it does not end very well for anyone. One thing I need to say is that the Oblivion Crisis was far crazier than Oblivion would have you believe, given how goofy the game is. Whole cities fell. Millions across the continent lost their lives, and the death toll in that short period of time would have been unlike anything Town had seen, since Pelennor Whitestrake was throwing a hissy fit and giving away spoilers. Apparently, the Danger went full World War Z on the Crystal Tower, and as the Outma made their last stand, the bodies of their foes began to form mountains, which seemingly endless Daedra clambered on top of. They caused tremors, earthquakes that not even the mighty Crystal Tower could withstand, and despite the best efforts of the High Elves, who believed the Crystal Tower would never fall, it eventually crumbled. The Outma were at Dagon's mercy, until Martin Septim went full Shenron, bashed up the Daedric Prince, then remembered he's played by Sean Bean and had a dramatic death. Rest in peace, my emperor. Things would have gone a lot better if you survived. But he didn't, because again, he's played by Sean Bean, and trouble really started brewing when the Thalmor stood together for much of the defence of the Somerset Isles, and thus gained a considerable amount of political power and public affection. This meant their philosophy of Altmerian supremacy began to catch fire. This also coincided with the end of the Septim dynasty, and thus the first real era of weakness and uncertainty since Tiber Septim took the royal throne. Now, whether you believe the Thalmor were heroes in the Oblivion Crisis or not, and I'm willing to bet most of you don't, the one thing they are is opportunistic. In 4E, Year 6, the Thalmor apparently egged on the Argonians, who were hot off the heels of playing the Uno reverse card on the Daedra. Because the Argonians had done so well during the Oblivion Crisis, they actually ended up stronger following it, and thus decided they didn't need the Empire anymore. With them being independent, the Thalmor thought it'd be a good idea to get them to invade Morrowind, and the Argonians were more than up for it, ready to take revenge for years of farm tool mistreatment. Because of all the hissed steroids and the whole Doomslayer situation, this was sort of a perfect nexus for the Argonians to launch this invasion. This was just after the Red Year, essentially the dummy version of 2020, where everything that could have gone wrong did. Because the Argonians took the bait and went all in on the Dunmer, this caused a lot of friction for the Empire, because one of their provinces had just been attacked, but they weren't in a position to offer any aid, at least from Cyrodiil. Although you might find it hard to believe now, Skyrim were the ones that actually came to Morrowind's aid, giving them somewhere to hide because of their scaly attackers. Around the time this entire mess was going on, the Empire basically exploded, when Ocasso, the guy we left in charge after Martin Septim's death, got assassinated, which could have been due to the Thalmor. A rule of thumb here, if there's an important assassination during this time period, the Thalmor probably could have had something to do with it. Now, let's turn to meet the first Buster Clothing warlord with mighty cojones
For automation
took the
stuff yun
throne
kasi
and patched together the
hindi mo pa siya
empire, the
kailangan,
Thalmor
right?
had overthrown their own government,
Madali pa
changing
lang
the
naman.
Central Isles
Kailangan
to
mo ng
Avenor,
small amounts of
and they had one thing on their
item
mind,
lang.
getting the band back
Sa akin
together.
kasi isang
You
damakmak
see,
na
the
kailangan.
Bosmer were once again in another civil dispute, because of course they were. Can't you cannibals just get along for 5 minutes? Of course, the Thalmor stuck to the script, and by pushed the Bosmer to form the Third Aldmeri Dominion with them. At this point, the Empire was busy dealing with a flying island coming out of nowhere and causing havoc. I know it's weird, there's a book about it, and no, we're not going over it now. Just know that the Empire had a lot going on and kinda just let the Thalmor do whatever. So they did. In the 42nd year of the Fourth Era, the Thalmor decided it was time for some friendly fire, and went after Altmer dissidents who had fled prosecution in Alinor, since, as much as these guys think Altmer are superior, they also don't like it when people disagree with them. Now, these dissidents fled to Sentinel, a city in Hammerfell, which was still a part of the Empire at the time. Long story short, they turned the city into a Korean barbecue. Well, at least one of its quarters, and, well, basically everybody in that quarter died. This was known as the Night of Green Fire, and on paper this probably should have been enough of a provocation to start a war. But again, the Empire had to deal with a floating island, so I guess they just didn't care. Imagine being Hammerfell in this situation. One of your major cities gets the Blackwater Bay treatment, and the Empire you're under is just saying, nah, you'll be fine. Still, the Aldmeri Dominion were missing the third member of their posse. If Alinor is Jesse and Tolwood is James, then elsewhere is Meowth. This takes a bit longer, but in 4E98, the Void Nights occur, where the moons just vanish for 2 years. Don't ask me how this happened, I got nothing. That's an entirely different video topic, but some people say that the Thalmor did this somehow. I mean, how do you even go about making the moons vanish? You don't think Gru's working for the Alma, do you? Now, while everyone thought it was kinda weird not to have the moons in the sky, the Khajiit went full panic mode. You see, they need the moons to determine their forms, called Furstock. We aren't quite sure what happened to the Khajiit during this period. It could have ranged from no new Khajiit being born to an epidemic of stillbirths or crazy mutants shooting out of their mums. Either way, when the moons finally came back, the Thalmor took credit, and this greatly diminished Imperial influence in the country. So that when the country's leader, the Maid, was assassinated again, probably due to the Thalmor, the Medes couldn't stop the civil war that eventually split the country in two. These provinces were called Anaquina and Peloton, and both became client states of the Aldmeri Dominion, officially getting the band back together. Now it was time to get an Altmer butt on the throne.
Hindi, kunin mo yan, boy. Kunin mo yan, kunin mo yan, kunin mo yan, kunin mo yan. Kunin mo yung inismalt mo dyan, kunin mo yung inismalt mo dyan. Basta, kunin mo. Kunin mo, kunin mo.
It was pretty one-sided. While the Altmer were stuck in a stalemate against the people of Hammerfell, they stormed through Cyrodiil, capturing the Imperial City, thus believing they had won the war. Unfortunately for them, Titus Mead channeled his Chad of an ancestor for a final battle, and clutches up, recapturing the city and getting a peace agreement. Well, it wasn't actually Titus, it was the protagonist of the card game, but the world believed it was Titus, so what are you gonna do? Still, because the Thalmor ploughed through Imperial forces like they were a field, they had the upper hand in the peace agreement, thus leading to the White Recorded. And I know for a fact they had the most devious smile cooking this up. The Dominion demanded a portion of South Hammerfell, and that Talos worship began. This then led to Hammerfell leading the Empire. I don't need to tell you that Talos worship banned here. This also included the Blades getting decimated, and that practically leads us to where we're at in Scotland, where the Empire was still leading, and the Thalmor are seemingly on top.
What? Come here! What are pwedeng ano, saan ka pwedeng mag...
Now, before we go on to what the Thalmor's endgame is, I have to tell everyone something they probably know. These lot are evil. I'm not talking force of nature evil like Alduin, or evil from a certain point of view like Ulfric Stormcloak. I'm talking comedically, insanely evil. You might be thinking, well, obviously they're evil supremacists. Of course they're evil. But they're somehow worse than that. They have that immense hate for Talos, as we've mentioned before, trying to remove his worship. But they also hate everyone who worships anyone that isn't in their pantheon. This includes the Daedra, so they hate the Daedra, and the Bosmer for their iteration of Ephrae. Despite being allies with Valenwood, the Thalmor are straight up worshipping the Bosmer there, which is just mental behaviour. And this comes straight from the horse's mouth with Malborn. Well, technically Delphine talking about Malborn, but she has no reason to lie about this. I also assume this purging extends to the more tribal Bosmer, and their way of life, which the Thalmor probably see as barbaric. Given how isolated these tribes tend to be, it would be easy to make sure no one is better. To do that to an enemy is one thing, but to an ally? It's utterly mental. What's even crazier is that the Thalmor don't even like other Outlaw that much. We've already got the Knight of Green Fire as an example, but then there's the Sigic Order. They used to occupy one of the islands in the Somerset Isles, being some of the most powerful Outlaw mages, but saw what the Thalmor were doing, refused to cooperate, and took their island of Artia and left none. Because apparently that's something they can just do. They clearly oppose the Thalmor in places, since they turn up to help us with the Eye of Magnus after Ancano gets a taste of unlimited power. They will throw hands and try to eradicate literally anyone if they oppose them. Literally anyone. But that isn't even the maddest part. Elven supremacy is the Thalmor's goal. And you might think that they want to do it in the same way their ancestors, the Aelids, did it. The Aelids subjugated the Needs, a race of men, ruling from the White Gold Tower, until a demigod cow and a madman cosplaying as a crusader decided it was time to shake things up. This, while evil, would at least be understandable. And I'm talking logically, not ethically. From an ethical standpoint, enslaving people is obviously very, very evil and very wrong. I probably don't have to say that, but I also don't want people coming after me. Now, the Dunmer of Morrowind did something similar with the Argonians, hence the whole farm tools thing and the lack of revenge. But the Thalmor want to go even further beyond. They hate humanity with a passion that can only be matched by Gareth Bale's passion for golf, and thus hate the human's main god, Lorcan. So the end goal is to just bin humanity. Get rid of them. Wholesale. Literally just attached to purge them off the face of the moon, but their goal is a lot more extreme. You see, the Thalmor are so up themselves that they believe they should be gods again, and that every other race shouldn't exist. And they plan to do this with time travel. Kinda. Okay, this gets complicated, and I'm not 100% sure if this is real official, but it's a very popular theory at the very least. Kind of like Game of Thrones is R plus L equals J, so buckle yourselves in. Now, if you cast your mind back, you'll remember that I mentioned the Crystal Tower. It's one of the towers of Mern, and that's a tower with a capital T, which stabilizes Mundus, the universe. These towers are also capable of great magical feats, and some examples include the Numidia, known as the Brass Tower, which is an artificial example, and the White Gold Tower, which could have potentially turned Cyrodiil from jungle to what we see in Oblivion. They can rewrite reality and cause dragon breaks, essentially fractures in time that cause alternate realities to be true ones. Some towers, like the White Gold Tower and the Crystal Tower, while others are geographical monuments, like the Red Mountain being the Red Tower, or the Throat of the World potentially being the Snow Tower, I think. Honestly, the Snow Tower is a bit of a weird one. Now these towers clearly have an effect on the world, which can be seen in the prophecy of the Dragonborn.
When misrule takes its place at the 8 corners of the world, when the brass tower moves and time is reshaped, when the thrice blessed
dynamic
fail,
lights ba?
and the red tower trembles, when the Dragonborn ruler loses his throne, and the white tower falls, when the snow tower lies sundered, kingless, bleeding, the world eater wakes, and the wheel turns upon the last dragon.
The Thalmor's plan is to destroy these towers, and in doing so the world will revert to the convention, essentially where the rules of Nirn and Mundus were being shaped, at least from my understanding. The belief is that the Thalmor will go back here to prevent humanity from ever being created, and also ensure that the Outma can remain as gods. This will essentially be the destruction of the world as we know it, and the Thalmor might be uncomfortably close to realising this goal. The new medium is gone, the Crystal Tower is destroyed, and the Red Mountain blew up during the Red Year. According to the prophecy of the Dragonborn, the Snow Tower isn't in good shape either. This leaves the Adamantine Tower in High Rock, the Green Sap in Valenwood, and the Orichalk, thought to be in the sunken continent of Yakuna, where the Red Guards came from. There are also metaphysical towers, but long story short, the Thalmor might not be far off realising their goal, which, as I said before, is a delightfully fantastical mix of pure insanity and evil. Now, will they? Probably not. If the Thalmor win, Bethesda can't milk the Elder Scrolls series, and if we look at the Dwemer, trying to make an entire race divine usually doesn't go too well. If it ever gets that far, the Sigil Order probably have to intervene en masse, and if it goes beyond even that, maybe the gods themselves will get involved. They already did in the Crisis, and by Akatosh sending the last Dragonborn to put Alduin in a time out. So, if it gets that far, I'm sure Kain, Talos, or even Morkan will send an avatar or something. That's assuming the Thalmor are in as good shape as we think. With all the secret purging, there's a chance that resistance groups are being set up in the Sunset Isles, especially because the Thalmor have no issue with making enemies of their own people. But the problem is, we know so little about the Elder Scrolls 6 that it's impossible to tell what direction Bethesda wants to go in. That's even assuming the direction they have planned after Skyrim is the same one they have planned now, 14 years later. The Thalmor could even get off-screen between games, falling to a revolution. I doubt it, since they're one of Skyrim's most interesting factions, but I wouldn't put it past Todd and crew at this point. Still, thank you for watching. The Thalmor are a weird topic, considering that they parallel a certain group led by a mediocre painter, shall we say. Despite how evil these guys are, I feel like people take them pretty lightly. They see a patrol here and there, decimate them and go about their day thinking they saved some Nords from subjugation, but oh no, it's way worse.
So,
These guys aren't your local, I don't want them living in my
this
neighborhood kind of racist. They're your, I hate you so much that I'm willing to revert the world to its infant stage so I can stop you and your entire race from ever existing kind of racist. It's mental. But you know what else is mental? Making it this far through a video and not liking, subscribing and commenting something witty. And hopefully, I'll see you in another one down the line.
I-grind kita.
And sails fly at half mast, the color of the
Tapos ngayon, gamitin mo yun. I-right click mo yun dyan. Ayan. So ngayon ay ng mga kailangan mo resources. Kailangan mo ng dirt, kailangan mo ng copper, kailangan mo ng wheat seeds. Dahil nagsisimula ka pa lang, sponsoran na kita. Pumunta ka rito. O, hanapin mo yung copper dyan, hanapin mo na yung wheat seeds dyan, hanapin mo na yung
Oblivion, then you've probably seen this helmet knocking around before. It belongs
Gusto
to
ko lang
Pelennor
naman.
Whitestrake, the Divine Crusader. And with a drip like that, you're probably thinking he went on a field trip to Jerusalem with the boys. As iconic as this design is, he doesn't really look much like an Elder Scrolls character, which is ironically in character for him. But trust me when I say he's probably the series' most
Oo, actually
wacky guy,
naka-open. Narinig ko
despite the
sa
somewhat
stream
generic
mo. Yes,
appearance.
yes, yes.
Any event which is
Naka-open kasi yung
revolving
stream
is
niya sa
revolving
akin.
up, mainly revolving around his steaming hatred of the elves. But his origins come from an even larger
Okay,
question.
wala na akong magawa.
And Pelennor
Balik tayo
Whitestrake
sa...
has become a bit of a meme in the community. We're not even sure what he is, but we have theories. So let's start with how Pelennor came crashing into Nern and the bloody first impression he made.
Para matouch mo siya. Yan. Tapos nga pindutin mo yung button. Para makraft yung...
First and foremost, Pelennor Whitestrake is famous for being the greatest elf killer in Tamriel's history, which says a lot, considering that Ysgramor nearly made the snow elves extinct, giving him quite the bar to clear. You see, in the Merethic era, elves were running rampant all over Tamriel,
okay na ang
but the
ping
power
ko. Tara
dynamic began to change in the era's waning years. The return of the
Next year,
changed
nice.
everything. Unbeknownst to the antagonists of this story, the Aelids, also known as
what's
the
this?
Heartland High Elves,
Challenge
who were
room?
greedy enough to have an empire in most provinces throughout the continent. They had cities in what would
What
later
the
become
hell?
Cyrodiil, High Rock, Phalenwood, elsewhere Hammerfell, the Somerset Isles, and somehow Blackmarsh. Yet their capital stood exactly where you think it would, in the White Gold Tower, at the very heart of the continent. This is before humanity became a true force in Tamriel, with the Red Guard still being in the continent of Yokuda, and the Admorans only just entering the picture in Skyrim. And they were too busy on the to launch an invasion against the Aelids, at least so far. Those already in Tamriel, the Needs, found themselves subjugated by the Aelids, with little hope of being freed. Their subjugation ran so deep that, for the most part, Needic culture emulated Aelid culture, which included a healthy dose of Daedra worship, a little tidbit to keep in mind for later. After the Admorans reduced the point in population in Skyrim, it gave one Needic woman an idea that changed everything. What if she prayed to the gods who championed humanity? And this woman's name was Alessia. Alessia
Wild
prayed
West
to
Challenge.
liberation from the Aelids and their Daedric armies, and at sanctuary, or at a shrine beneath the White Tower, sources vary, she was granted visions by Akatosh, and thus a road to freedom.
So ngayon, lagyan mo yung huwag ka lang nag-bottle kasi ginagamit mo yung forever.
The three I want you to remember, and I use Sean
Wag naman
Pine's
din right
Nordic
button.
names here because their imperial ones haven't been invented yet.
Wag rin R. Suggest ko dyan, gumamit ka ng parang ganon. Kung ikot yung Alt A, mag-E ka,
I have named it, and I call it
Done.
freedom,
So,
which I think is just
Alt
another
A mo,
word
pindutin mo
for
Alt
Shazar,
A.
who goes missing. Kine seemed fond
Hindi,
of
pinag
Alessia, so much so that she sent her son to the Needs side all the way from Mora House, the Manbull. The
Pwede
birth
try mo
of
na lang.
Kine,
Siguro,
a powerhouse
ano
who
ba?
used Thune, the best archer of the
Para
era.
medyo mas
Kine
malapit.
sent Morehouse as a leader of Alessia's armies, and her rebellion was in full swing with the demigod at her side, granting her
Control
the
pala sa
title
akin.
of
Sorry,
Slave
palitan mo
Queen.
Control A pala. Control A.
That said, Kine
Control A.
probably didn't
Yan.
expect the pair to
Done.
fall in love, but that happened, linking the goddess's blood to Alessia's line
Ba't ka
from there on.
nag-specialize ka?
So
Agad
Kine
sira
was
ulo.
not to arrive alone, for there was one
Bumalik ka
more
dun.
to join the party. Pelinal Whitestrake, the
Naka-stream
divine
mga
Lord
favorite
Satan,
streamer ko.
and his
Yay!
devotion was pretty
Kasi
hardcore.
bababa heal mo.
Sabay-sabay ka.
Oh.
He had no idea where Kine came from. It has been proposed
Doon ka lang
that
muna
he was
sa
one of the
pangisahan kasi
500
wala ka namang kasama sa
companions
loob.
from the war. Though it's conflicting and likely not true.
Ngayon,
Many legends are documented. Of course, Eskimo, Ilga,
yan. So ngayon, gumawa mo na ng
Tiny,
chest.
and so on.
Gumawa mo na ng chest, store mo na yung mga gamit mo
Perhaps
rito.
carved in a brick
Tapos
in
kumuha ka na rin ng
Wilhelm,
either
although
sword or
he's not
axe
directly
as
mentioned,
a
so
weapon.
this is more of a baseless theory.
Ay,
Others
ang
suggest
baba
that he
ng
was
dash.
a wanderer, a warrior king conquering
No,
all of
hindi mo siya
Tamriel
magagamit
bit
sa
by
loob ng...
bit.
Wala
But
siyang
since he
purpose at the
abandons his
moment.
kingdoms as he
For
travels,
you.
this was never done under a
Naka-disable.
single banner. Again, this assumes that several
Ay,
people
wala.
throughout history are
Ay,
actually Pelennor.
umikot lang ako.
Again, is likely not true. What
Hindi
is
nga
known
kasi
is that he
magkakaiba ng
arrived in
bundle.
Alessia's camp one day with Morehouse, and the two were known to be friends,
Nakikita mo,
meaning
kuya,
that he
pasko sa'yo
likely
to.
has a
Kumuha ka na
connection
ng
to
chest mo
Kine,
manually.
which will also be a discussion later.
Isang paikot lang.
Arrived in a mason's warlords, and pledged himself to Alessia, marked as the champion of the H Divines, armed with their gifts as armor and weapons, known as Crusader Rays. And this meant that, at least at the time, couldn't harm him. Now the trio was together, the Manbull, the Slave Queen, and the Divine Crusader, ready to rid Tamriel of Aelid rule. Although it would take a while because there were a lot of elves, and Pelennor wasn't exactly despite Morehouse being a demigod, Pelennor was the heavy hitter, and boy did he love killing elves. Although he and Morehouse were meant to lead Alessia's armies, Pelennor kinda didn't
Double
need
touch
anyone on his
ulit.
back. As stated before, the
Ay,
Aelids were
ako.
all over
Meron
the
akong
continent,
extra.
spread across a myriad of different provinces, yet they weren't a unified empire, which meant that there were
Server. Online ka na rin. Madami tayo sa ano,
over the
server.
regions and city-states. Pelennor would thus change the Sorcerer Kings to single combat, and on account of not being able to be harmed because of his shiny armor, he would decimate. Of Copper and Tick, Gordar the Shaper, and the Fire King Hadhald. All these guys are basically meant to be following name
Galit ba? Galit ah.
These guys are no joke, being extremely powerful sorcerers and warriors.
Bye-bye.
Strike proved to be the most prolific killer of all time. Yet this also came with signs of his madness. You see, in his battle with
Give me the
Pelennor
books.
decided
Give
to
me the
light the
books.
before fall and give away some spoilers. As he bit Paramir's neck veins like a vampire, for some reason, he started to scream Remen's name, which shouldn't be one he should know. We are, of course, assuming that the Remen in question is Remen Cyrodiil, who turned up far, far later during the first Akavirian invasion to found the Second Cyrodiilic Empire, after the empire that Alessia is yet to found as of this point. Yet Pelennor is screaming about him over 2,000 years earlier. Somehow. Still, while the cracks were starting to show, he hadn't gone full loony as of yet. But this would change after a specific loss hit him hard. Now bear with me, we're going to go into
Wala
Pellennor's
ako.
love life a
Make
little
sure ko
bit
sino
here,
yung
and
mga...
for whatever reason, there are sources stating that Pelennor and Alessia were
Ay,
lovers.
sorry. Naka-play natin pala sa akin yung Strip ni Pops.
But this doesn't mean that Pellinor was incapable of love. We know that he loved a hoplite named Hannah, whom he had
Sa akin din,
turned
nakabukas
from
din stream ni
slave to
Pops.
a warrior. It is unknown if this love was romantic or plutonic, but when Hannah was slain by an arrow from Sedefel the singer, who I'm assuming is an alien sorcerer king, on account of the name, Pellinor succumbed to his first madness. Now to me, this seems to be inspired by Achilles' rage after the death of his lover, Patroclus, during the Iliad, in which he slew so many Trojans that he managed to piss off a river and got into a fist fight with it. Don't ask me, the Iliad is really weird.
Naka-open niyo pala si...
Everything, yes, everything, from the city
Sabay-sabay mga nag-live. Party.
because Pellinor wiped them off the face of the earth. But I'm assuming that both were in Cyrodiil, and since he destroyed everything in between, including the lives of elves and men alike, this madness probably resulted in a 6 or even 7-figure death toll. Which, I mean, is crazy even
Uy, what?
Alessia had to make a sacrifice to the ancient lions to stop them from leaving the world in disgust, which, considering all the stuff they've already seen up to this point, and the fact that they chose this guy to be their champion, is quite a scary thing to imagine. It's also similar to the end of the Iliad, where the sacking of Troy leads to many of the gods being disgusted with humanity, except it was done to 2 city-states and by one guy, not a whole host of Greek heroes.
Oh no.
Just imagine that.
Cheesy, that's cheesy. Guess walang spider din.
From existence because some dude in a greyhound threw a hissy fit. In response, they decided to call upon one of their dated princes they love so much, Meridia. And in response, she presented them with an army of Aurorans. Knowing her, she probably screamed about her beacon too.
Toggle in-world waypoints. Yay!
Anyway, this army wouldn't do the Aelids many favours if they couldn't put them behind a champion capable of challenging Pellinor. And thus, Umaril the said to be the weakest of the sorcerer kings and a demigod, with his father being a divine in the previous caliber, essentially the previous world cycle. Umaril got to work immediately and decided his best strategy was to rage against Pellinor, who was incredibly volatile at this point, challenging him to a battle, something the Crusader wasn't used to being on the opposite end of. Now beyond pissed off, Pellinor took to leading Alessia's armies and began just eradicating Aelids left, right and centre, taking all of eastern Cyrodiil, smashing the city of Vartigor. Then he waddled his way up north to remove the Aelids from what would later be the Colovian states, and I assume Falkreath, for this land was given to the men of Kreath. Now, while we're used to seeing Pellinor with his helm up, note that beneath, he's a pretty boy with Sephiroth's hair. This glorious man of silver hair, and instead of using L'Oreal like a normal person, Pellinor preferred the blood of his enemies. With as many enemies as Pellinor has, he eventually found his luscious looks dirt brown from all the blood, which is mental when you consider that he wore his helmet most of the time. Did he just soak through the metal? At this point, raging beyond belief, Pellinor was prone to more acts of madness, and while this didn't lead to friendly fire on this occasion, it wasn't a good time to be a neutral either, as the Khajiit of elsewhere would soon find out. I'll warn you now, what you're about to hear is strange by even Elder Scrolls standards, but I promise you there are official sources for this part of the story, including ESO dialogue and the books, Varieties of Faith in the Empire, and the Elsewhere version to the Pocket Guide to the Empire first edition. So Pelennor was so high on elfkin that he mistook the pointy ears of the Khajiit to be elven ears, and decided to just start decimating them en masse. Granted, some Khajiit first stock do kinda look like elves, but I'm assuming because he was mad, he was curb stomping all of them, from the house cats to the giant tiger people, and this forced the Khajiit to start running to the mountains.
Putik challenge room na
The
naman.
Khajiit are good climbers, and the hope was that they would find safety in the mountains.
Sige.
But
I need living chest.
this man has identified you as an elf, and a little something like altitude wasn't going to stop this man from slaying some elves, even if they weren't really elves. So he wrestled a mountain, apparently, until he was on top of it. Now, I don't know if this means he just climbed the thing aggressively, or literally picked the whole thing up and suplexed it so he was on top of it.
Nice.
But I wouldn't be surprised by either at this point. After seeing a dude in full play armor wrestle a mountain, whatever that means, I'll leave that up for interpretation, the Khajiit decided to
Nah,
call upon
yung
some divine
risk.
aid, and Alkosh, the Khajiit version of Akatosh, who is
I need knowledge essence.
came to straighten things out.
Five.
And by straightening things out, I mean that Pelennor ended up in a fight with the Dragon God of Time,
Seven.
and in his only true yes, the Divine Crusader was sent flying, not just off the mountain, but out of elsewhere with a shout so mighty that Alkosh caused a time wound on the spot. Bear in mind that the time wound on the throat of the world
Okay, ganun pala yun.
was made by an Elder Scroll and sending Alduin through time, so this kind of puts into
Hindi ka
perspective
pa nag-craft ng file. Yes, hindi pa ako napag... Hindi pa ako napag-craft at all. Ganda ng challenge room na yun. Kaya nga eh. Na... Hindi ko nga siya nag-guess ng unang beses eh. Oh, wow, may
doing was make him realise how dumb he was for mistaking these fluffy dudes for elves. And he got straight back to work,
Wild
dying
West.
the next day.
I need to adjust this color depth, resolution scale. Okay. Dithering amount.
We need to take a quick pause from Pelennor for some
para mas shitty siya.
You see, at this point, it was
shittier.
tough to bear to get Alessia and her crew, so allies began to flock to her from all over. Of course, the bulk of her forces came from the three tribes all over Cyrodiil, but the now decided the cancellation of elves and added to Alessia's army. Some aides could tell where the wind was blowing, and rebelled against their own people to fight for Alessia's cause.
Wait, paano ba makapag-craft ng vial muna?
When all the fighting ended,
Parang gusto ko nang mag-craft muna bago ako mag... Ay, putik! Fuck, shit.
many of Alessia's allies were ready to go and an assault against the White Gold Tower. But at this point, Pellennor's sanity was taken by a friend, and he essentially called them all yellow-bellied cowards. After getting into a fight with Alkosh, following his most outrageous bout of madness to date, he was flogged out of the mouth, and even Morathouse couldn't get him to change. A one-man invasion of the White Gold Tower.
Oh shit,
Apparently, the warriors from Maria didn't do a lot to slow Pelennor down. He turned most of them into strawberry jam, then rolled up in the throne room of the White Gold Tower to pull more out. As powerful as predicted, he had a bunch of soldiers empowered with valiants. Could actually managing to exhaust and
Ah, yes, cheese it. Cheese it. Cheese it.
and the supposed Godbane got dumped. A mortal wound. Despite the injury, Whitestrake was not exactly
Cheese,
saying
cheese,
at this
cheese,
point,
cheese.
despite all of his injuries. Whitestrake thought that rage baiting the remaining Sorcerer Kings was a good idea, insulting their lineage and probably saying something very racist. This was apparently bad enough
Holy
to
shit.
send the Sorcerer Kings
Holy
into
shit.
their own mad frenzy.
Oh shit,
They
oh shit.
cut Pelennor up into 8 pieces as a
Oh shit,
mockery
oh
of
shit.
the 8 divines,
Dami na
leaving his
masyado.
head for Alessia to find. But the Slave Queen would
Buti na lang
not be
pwedeng
the one to
i-chicks.
discover the death of her greatest warrior. The next morning,
Wala
realizing that
na,
Pelennor
wala
had
na,
gone
wala
home,
na.
Morahouse gathered Alessia's legions and led them to the White Gold Tower, shaking the entire thing by ramming it with his horns. Since Pelennor had done most of the hard work, it didn't take Morahouse long to clear the place out, and he found his friend's head on the throne. Now when people get their heads cut off, they tend to be dead, but not Pelennor. No, he spent the night chilling on the throne without a body, kept alive by Aelid magics as a form of torment, and was ready to have a chat when Morahouse finally waddled his way over. We aren't sure what they talked about, but it is said that the conversation was long. Steve and Morahouse talked about things they related, which would never reach Alessia's ears, and ours as well, apparently. For the sake of the future DLC, Pelennor did mention that Umara was sneaking enough to probably come back, but you can play nicer than
Uy,
not
hindi
anything
ko
more
namatay.
than that. After this, Pelennor finally kicks the bucket, and Alessia becomes Cyrodiil's first ever Empress, having a child with Morahouse, Belhaza. Hold on a minute, that's the official artwork for it. That, it looks like a
Oh
goddamn
my
Mark
god.
II plushie. What's going on? Well, anyway, this is the
Okay.
guy who succeeded Alessia, but upon the Empress's deathbed, Pelennor would return as a spirit to guide her to Etheirys, claiming that death had brought him peace from his madness. And then he comes back again to help the hero of Greenwich finally deal with Umari. And yet, none of this has answered a key question. What in Oblivion is Pelennor Whitestrake?
It could be shittier,
The
but
short answer
it's
is
higher effort to
we
like,
don't
make it
know.
look shitty.
The long answer is that we have a few theories. The boring theory is that he was just a Nedic warrior who got his hands on the Crusaders' relics, and through that was able to do some impressive feats, which would later get propaganda enhanced until he sounded like some divine warrior later on in history. The weirder theory is that he's a time-travelling cyborg.
Wala na.
Yes, stay with me on this one. He's an artificial Arda, essentially a lesser god, sent back in time by Kain to deal with the elves. The main evidence comes from how futuristic Pellennor's armour is for the time period, and him screaming about spoilers far in the future, particularly with Remnant Cyrodiil. Then there's the theory that he's a Shezareen, essentially a mortal reincarnation of the dead god Shor.
Ay, pwede. Okay na, okay na, okay na tayo, okay na tayo, okay na tayo dito.
You're most familiar with.
Second
I'm
floor,
going to
sa
be
second
calling him
floor
Shor
na
from this
dito.
point on. Now, this is the theory that Remnant Cyrodiil believed, as the later Emperor refers to the Divine Crusader as a Shezareen in the Song of Pelennor, and it's the one I'm more inclined to believe as well, although he really could be anything. Let's have a look at what we do know about Pelennor, so maybe we can all start theorising together in the comments. First of all, let's look at Pellennor's one familiar link, Morahouse. The two are more than just friends apparently, since it's stated that Pelennor refers to Morahouse as nephew. I'm unsure if this is a relationship, but I'm largely inclined to believe it isn't. An interesting thing to note is that if Pelennor is a Shezareen, he is the mortal reincarnation of Shor, thus the reborn version of Kain's husband, who is Morahouse's mother. So this could be why Pelennor feels we don't know who Morahouse's family is, and he's probably someone who is largely unimportant. But this
Naulit ako nakakita ng fitting room ng ganito ah.
because it's a two-way street. Another point is that Pelennor is described as having no heart, a red diamond that sang like a mindless dragon. Shor is known to have had his heart torn out by Akdosh, and I've seen some theories suggesting that Pelennor is Shor's corpse, given the lack of a heart and the whole mindless dragon thing. This could be in reference to Akatosh's actions, and that Pelenor's madness is from this. Shor and Akatosh are twins, two sides of the same coin, and it is said that ripping his brother's heart out is what led Akatosh to go mad, splitting into several aspects, and that madness could be where Pelennor gets it from. Really, Whitestone himself didn't like these comparisons, getting mad when the nerds from Skyrim saw him for the first time.
Ay, clear out na lang natin.
Talk in general, except when it came from Alessia, and yet he talked about his twin nature and seemed to kill him during his madness. He even said, Umaril dares call us out, for that is how
Bloodstone na lang
he was slain by most of the other Aedra, and currently is born without his heart, which might be why he doesn't want to be called Shor, because he kind of isn't. Being called Shor pissed him off so much that he slaughtered the Aids holding Helming Bridge, and this was apparently brutal enough that it got called Pelenor's
Ang ganda na
Weekly
ganda na ng run
like it's
na
some
yan eh.
twisted holiday. Furious to in nature with Akatosh, he might have even been able to see into the future, explaining the whole Remen thing. But I do want to point out that this is all theoretical. I'm kind of just spitballing here, but because of how odd Pelennor is, there are a lot of things that I can't make sense of. So, Pelennor is often associated with the fox, which makes sense, since this is Shor's animal aspect. But he's also associated with the warfare places, which is Mara's animal aspect. I'm not really sure what Mara has to do with any of this, since I'm pretty confident that Pelennor never got married. Then we have other titles, like the Khajiit calling Whitestrake the White Snake. The snake is okay in the Nordic pantheon, and is an enemy of man, which doesn't really add up. The name Pelennor is also thought to be a corruption of Pelin El, which means star-made night, and the stars were made by a bunch of fallen gods, who followed Magnus into leaving the world just before it was fully made. Now Magnus, as he burst into Aetherius, made the sun, which Auriel is the god of, so perhaps Pelennor is the god of stars, and this is why there's an association with Akatosh. I kind of feel like I'm pulling things out my arse at this point, because Pelennor is such a strange figure. To basically round this section off, the information I'm given states that Pelennor is at least an Arda, a somewhat divine being, considers Morahouse's nephew, obviously hates elves, doesn't have a heart, has the rage of a mindless dragon, has a twin association with Akatosh, has association with many animal aspects, has something to do with the stars, and has information from the future. It's kind of tough to work all of this out. It's even harder to figure out if any of it is true because it's Elder Scrolls. For the more mythical figures like Pelennor, there are often several sources with opposing reports, because it's accurate to how real history is recorded. Sometimes these sources are even victims of retcons. Still, maybe you guys can tell me about your Pelennor theories, whether that be a time-traveling cyborg, full army style, or Shor's reincarnation / dead body, because it's possible that half the stuff I've mentioned is just propaganda. So go whole wild, I guess. Once again, thank you for watching.
Naka-unlock na ba sa inyo na?
Last week with my Thalmor video, check that out here. So I figured I'd give him his time to shine. Let me know if I've missed anything, because there's a lot to do with Pelennor, and all of it is sheer insanity. He's just mental. And that's kind of the
What do you mean?
He's the champion of the divines, yet he's also a power they cannot control. Yes, Alessia was able to calm him down after bouts of madness, but it's not like anyone could stop him when he was cleaning out whole cities or kicking cats. Well, except for Akatosh himself. And don't forget that an avatar of Akatosh binned Mehrunes Dagon. If most of the stuff that is said about Pelennor is true, he is one of the most powerful figures in all of Elder Scrolls, and his madness potentially makes him the most dangerous as well. I personally find the entire part about Pellennor's regrets parts the most interesting, and how he was aware of his own madness, but at the same time a prisoner of it, describing it as when the dream no longer needs its dreamer. I do wonder what regrets he and Morahouse talked about, and
Should
if this
I?
led to
Should I not?
Morahouse having a child with Alessia to not be
Should I?
face to
Should I not?
face, especially as Pellinor was the potential lover with Hunter. We don't know where Morahouse is now, or if he's even still alive, so I guess we'll never get any answers. I hope I've given you at least some of the answers you're looking for, however, and please do the like, comment, and subscribe stuff. Maybe you'll tune in next week for another lore dive.
So the path was born again as the wolves of Yorbaskar to rule in life and serve in death as the moonlight's bound. This is so bad. And so the path was
Gusto,
born again
gusto ko ng thermal expansion para sa ores. Wait, research muna natin. Gold Hunter Stream Expansion. Okay, for the meantime, mag-ano muna tayo. Okay. For now, mag-ano muna tayo. Mag-understand na try natin yung thermal personal please.
This is still level 19. What? This one
If you don't feel like you're using BB version segregation. There is five.
Invisible ka, ha? Ba't invisible ka, ha?
Let's breed the rabbit.
Ha? Ba't nandiyan ka? Ha? Nagawa mo. Nagawa mo. Ubo. Nagawa mo. What you doing? Ay, wait. Tsaka yun, ah? What? Yung ano? Thank you. Salamat. Sige, salamat. Sige, i-claim ko na yan. Sige, sige. Okay lang yan.
Search muna natin thermal expansion. Thermal expansion. Or mag-mechanism na lang ba ako?
I'll take you up on your offer. Salamat. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Ewu. Ewu. Thank you so much. Magano na lang. Ano to? What's this? Ala, di mo. Ay, shit. Hello? Hello? Ayan, ninig na ako. Thank you so much. Maraming salamat sa iyong kabutihan, kindness, generosity. Nakamute pala ako the whole time. Oopsie.
Saan ko ito na didistract ako ng...
Thank you so much for your generosity and your kindness. Oh my god, this filter is so shitty. This filter is so ass. Oh my god, I'm still not used to like playing like this, but it's so interesting to like play like this. It's so cute. It's so cute. It's so aesthetic. It's so aesthetically. It's just so aesthetically pleasing. You know. Inside. What else? I have so much shit in here. What the fuck? I have a gingerbread house. Where do I put this? Gingerbread. Ooh, delicious gingerbread. Perfect. Perfect. Oh, diba? Da-da-da-da-da. Ano ba yun? Viewpoint thing? Basta shaders, maybe. Video settings, shader packs, settings, mesh. View model vertex? No, it's not this one.
I need to learn something.
Vertex?
Thermal expansion.
Terrain vertex? No. No, it's not this one. Post-processing? Why is it so shit when I zoom in? Shader pack settings, post-processing, color map, depth fog, color depth, dithering amount, fog distance. What's a fine mapping? Oh. Oh, but that removes everything. Aww. That removes everything. Oh man, I think I need to.
Maganda ko lang ako.
I need to play with fog.
I-figure out na lang natin. Mas masaya.
What's a fine mapping? Clamp, text chord bounds? What does that mean? Mesh settings, terrain, vertex, and accuracy. Yeah, there we go. Maximum nakakahilo. Maximum dizziness. Wow. Sound effects are shit. Bald crystal. Let me fix you up real good. Vault boots. Increase attack damage, crit resistance. Oh, okay. Yeah, okay. This'll do. This is cute. Hang on. I'm gonna insert this. Yeah, like this. I need the bucket. Right. I need this. I need water. Oh man. Even the water is it's not quite the same as before, as like Minecraft beta and alpha, but it's cute. It's cute enough. Where's the zombie? Fuck you. Tangna mo. Asa si Good Sir? Ba't may Good Sir dito? Uy! Bakit? Bawal ba? Bawal ba? It's a shader. It's a shader. Di naman masyado. I mean, kung nakita mo yung itsura kanina, kapag naka-shader glass ako kanina, may CRT filter pa doon kanina, mas nakakahilo yun. Hi Sir Jason, ba't lahat kayo nandito? Kasi lahat tayo naka-stream! Yeah! Yippee! Yippee!
Uy, wow, 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 wow,
Oh,
wow.
oh my
Grabe.
god. Good skill dyan. Hala! Hindi, literal
Wala.
namatay nga sila lahat. Oh my god.
Paano kung
Yeah.
namatay sila? Ayun o. Namatay siya.
Nakal...
Uy, namatay.
Lahat sila, oh, namatay na sila lahat. Hindi ko sila mabibreed kasi namatay na sila lahat. Isa lang. Oo, namatay sa akin.
Wait, okay pa ang
Dalawang
voice chat
Shiba
ko
is buhay
dito.
pa. Pero itong wolf na to, isa na lang natira. Oo, kasi namatay isa kasi may thorns ka.
Wala.
Yeah, he's dead. Oh no! Oh no! Hindi, okay na. Hindi, wag na. Tampo na ako. Hindi, malungkot na. Hindi na hindi na mapapalik ang nakaraan. Hindi
Ito
na.
isang tong tahimik mo.
Hindi na mapapalik ang nakaraan.
Mike, 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 Mike.
Si Kuya ka Jason. Si Jason J. Willow.
Hello, 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 hello,
Hi,
hello,
Pogi.
hello,
Hi,
hello.
Pogi. Hi, Pogi. Wait lang.
Wait, naman daw.
Try ko adjust sa stream ko para di siya masyado nakahilo.
Ano yung resource pack mo kanina?
Anong resource pack mo kanina?
Di siya resource pack eh. It's para ano siya, programmer art
Nahi,
tsaka shaders.
nahihilo ako dyan. Ay,
Para daw
to,
hindi
to.
masyadong mahirapan ng PC.
Ah,
Hindi,
okay.
actually na siya. Madali lang siya. It's
Ah,
fine
okay.
lang. It's
Gets,
fine
gets.
booster.
Hindi, I mean ano, like, ginagamit mo ba siya para hindi mahirapan ng PC mo or...
Ay,
Hindi,
nakapag-repaste ka na ba?
hindi pa lang. Kasi ano ko, maarte ako. I'm just nostalgic.
Ah, gets,
So
gets,
I'm
gusto
just
gets.
mo old
Parang
nostalgic.
be,
graphics ng Minecraft, okay.
yung old
Oo, kasi it's
graphics.
cute. Kaso now that you mention it, baka nga pwede i-adjust para di siya nakakahilo. Kasi hello.
Pinapanood ko siya kanina, parang nahihilo ako.
Wait lang, ano muna ako, pause muna ako nagamit sa invent.
Sige, okay na yan. Sige na nga, okay na nga. Hindi na. Okay, hindi na.
Nakapag-repaste ka na?
Nakapa?
Repaste? Thermal. Thermal.
Ay,
Thermal paste.
thermal paste, hindi pa.
Hindi
Thermal pa
pa.
lang siya.
Ah, para thermal. Ay, sa bagay.
Hindi sila makapunta sa face ko. No. So sad.
Yes, nanlulumo ako
Sad.
mag-fault eh.
Hindi ko maayos yung PC ko today. So kapag ito nag-crash, tapos ito nag-blue screen ulit, wala na. Wala na.
Wala na.
Pag ito nag-blue screen ulit, wala na.
Wag lang talaga mag-blue screen.
Good luck na lang po. Good luck na
Good
lang
luck
po
na
sa
lang.
akin. Good luck na lang po sa akin.
Sayang, walang crafting potential tong ano ko. Okay. Okay, babalik. Mag-ano muna ako. For farming. Oh my god. Ah. The log. Oh, the log.
Shitty the vault can be. Okay, let me just insert all of these. Sweet roll! Aww. Still so much shit in my inventory.
Happy
Let's
feet?
fix that. Let's fix that. Festive cake? Aww. Actual cake? Aww. Notice board beehive? Aww. Hot tub.
Oh no. Wait, ayusin natin ang... Ha. Ha. Uy, may isa pa akong...
considering how different divine aspects from different cultures
Yeah.
can simultaneously
Okay, so
exist,
to
despite
start,
being the same
tayo ay
being.
mag-thermal
Logically,
expansion
I
mode.
started with Akatosh, who you can probably consider to be the main god in the Elder Scrolls, and, well,
Mga
I
drown
ended
punta
up
sa
in a
tubig.
rabbit hole full of absolute nonsense that I struggle to make any sense of.
Thermal
Logically, you might
expansion.
think of making your main deity in a fantasy world the approachable and easy to understand option. This way, they are a strong gateway into the world's religion. But Bethesda seemed to do the opposite with Akatosh. He may be time itself, but time in Elder
Turns
Scrolls can
water
often be
into
broken,
ice and
and this has
snowballs.
left the Dragon God of Time, chief of the Nine
Aquatic
Divines,
machine
being a bit
upgrades.
of a weird hodgepodge of many different things.
Hey,
So
Jojo.
go find the most comfortable chair in the
The
library,
Jojo the
and let's
Awesome.
go on a deep dive into the strangeness that is Akatosh.
Welcome back to Vault Hunters 118, and in this episode we are going to be eating 28 knowledge stars in order to unlock thermal expansion. If you didn't see the last episode, which you should, it's a very good one, we grinded out the last 8 stars in only 2 hours, and today we reap the rewards. Oh, that is a lovely sound. Any more favorite sound of mine? Oh, new transmogs. Though I like my Rainbow King set. I'm thinking we'll look pretty dapper like this. I have to see these new transmogs. Thermal hum. Okay, that actually looks kind of cool. It's got a good look to it. Whoa. Okay. Definitely a really cool one. I'm definitely going to be needing to make an armor haul sooner or later. Ooh, because this one is looking like it's going to be quite good. But for now, we gotta stay focused, we gotta stay on track, because, you know, I'm really good at that. What I want to use thermal expansion for is the glass chiller to make ice, and I believe we can also make, yeah, snowballs, and I guess we can turn liquid honey into honey blocks, but we don't really need to do that, I don't think. I mean, I guess that does give us a way to turn the honeycomb we have into honey, so in case that needs to happen. For the most part, this will be a great way to farm ice and snowballs, so you don't ever have to go ice mining or snowball hunting. I'm quite tired of that. And for that,
Why, hello there. Welcome back to Vault Hunters. So today we're going to do something a little bit, it's not really different at this point, but we're going to unlock a new mod. We are going to explore our way into something brand new.
Metal from the amount of ore. What's up, guys? Today we're going to go over the thermal expansion mod. This video is going to serve as a quick start guide in order to be able to dip your feet into the mod. This will go over how you can, generate power, what you can kind of do with some of the machines, how to operate the machines, so on and so forth. So with that, let's jump right in. Alright, so first I think I just want to go over a couple of machines that you might want to use at the very beginning of using thermal expansion. My favorite two are the redstone furnace and the pulverizer. So what the redstone furnace will do is it will smelt items using redstone flux, which is a form of energy, rather than some sort of combustible fuel like coal. And then the pulverizer will pulverize objects such as iron ore or whatever into crushed materials, in that case pulverized iron. So the reason you might want a redstone furnace is so you can save on your fuels. It can also go faster than a normal furnace would, so you can just get things done faster. The pulverizer has a lot of very useful recipes. One in particular is that, if you could guess, if you smelt an iron ore like this, you'll get 1 iron ingot out. Perfectly acceptable. That's exactly what you would expect to do that. But if you use a pulverizer to pulverize iron ore, you'll actually get 2 pulverized iron out. And then the redstone furnace can smelt pulverized iron into an ingot at a 1-to-1 ratio, which means that you can basically double the amount of iron you get, or whatever metal, from the amount of ore, right? Because then we can smelt this again and get iron ingots back out. So this shows just one useful chain of machines you can do in thermal expansion. Alright, so when you open up one of the machines, you'll be met with a series of tabs on the sides here. The top right or top left one is your energy usage. I rarely expand this one because you can kind of glance at the storage right here and, you know, see what you're looking for. Information, it just gives you a little bit more information on the machine. The top right one is augmentations, where you can put, you know, machine upgrades that can upgrade things like speed. It can make your furnace specialized to do certain things. Much into that right now. You can also have redstone control. So I have it on redstone ignored, which means that it's just on all the time and it doesn't take any redstone